Hello, welcome to Nature to Tea, or welcome back, a channel where I provide information about health and beauty the natural way. If that sounds like something you are interested in, make sure you subscribe to my channel. Press the post notification button so you won't miss any of my videos that I post. Also, you can follow me on my TikTok platform where I do quick recipes, healthy recipes for the most part, as well as my Instagram at Nature to Tea. Okay, let's first start off with my disclaimer here. I'm not a medical expert and don't claim to be one. This video is strictly informational and should not be used as a medical advice. So if you must try any of these things that I'm saying, please first consult with your medical provider. Fasting is not for everyone, and especially if you do have disease or if you have any disorders, make sure you check with your healthcare provider first. Some of you may heard about fasting in many different religions, and some for the great health benefits that it has. There are studies that are finding all these great benefits of fasting, whether it's for religious reason or it's for health reason. There's lots of benefits about fasting and intermittent fasting, depending on what you're trying to achieve. Some just make it as part of their diet, and there's this thing that's becoming more and more popular these days, 1 meal a day, OMAD. So basically, that's just people who choose the diet of eating once a day. Fasting is abstaining from eating, and for some, eating and drinking. In my religion, which is Islam, when people fast, we don't eat or drink until from sunrise to sunset. Other religions also practice fasting, but in a different way. Some fast for 40 days, and some of them eat certain foods only and abstain from other foods. Religion, background, or a person's health all influence what fasting is to them. But basically, fasting is abstaining from certain food for a certain period of time. I'm going to tell you a brief story about our eating habits and how it developed and evolved over time. Long time ago, once upon a time, during the Stone Ages, we used to be hunters and gatherers. That means, we go hunting for games, berries, basically look for our food or whatever we can find, nuts. If we happen to capture or kill an animal, so we'll hunt for your food and then bring it home and then feast on it, and then whatever else they can find that was edible. People fasted when food wasn't available. That's just how the survival was at the time. Fast forward, during the Middle Ages, nothing was eaten before Mass, back in the Catholic or Roman time, hence creating the word breakfast. So basically, people fasted throughout the night, and then after the Mass, they break their fast. So that's where the word breakfast came from. Also at this time, due to lack of electricity, people had to get up early to utilize daylight. It was safer during the day to do things and work and things like that. So people used to get up early enough to work and utilize the daylight before it went down. While they worked, they took a break about midday to eat, which later became known as lunch, and they used to mainly eat things like bread and cheese and fruits and things like that. Now fast forward to the Industrial Revolution periods, which was the early 19th century, mid-19th century. So because of, the Industrial Revolution, there was a lot of labor workers and they worked long hours. So they had to start their day pretty early. It was a necessity for them to eat in the morning so they can, work hard during the day and for long hours. So that's when the idea of breakfast came about too and became the norm. And also around the time, there were the early development of toasters and pre-sugared cereals, instant coffee, easily accessible food and convenient food started to be introduced to, at least in America and European countries. And then about midday, they'll take a break and eat lunch. And then when they got home in the evening, they'll eat dinner. And so that's where that breakfast, lunch, dinner thing came from. It was a thing invented to meet the needs of their work schedule, basically. As you know, the Europeans traveled across the world and colonized people, they also introduced this 3 meal a day phenomenon to other cultures, which a lot of cultures also adopted. And when they came to America, the Indians ate differently. I think they ate when they were hungry, and even other cultures still this day, they eat when they're hungry instead of doing that 3 meal a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. As America and the West became more industrialized, more inventions came about. They created all these, factory-made, processed, convenient products. I don't like to call them food, but products that people consume basically. And with the invention of TV and internet too, with capitalism, the more you buy, the more money they make. So they introduce all these snacks. You need more than 3 meals a day. You're supposed to eat every 2 hours. So everybody just basically eat based on habits instead of based on what their body needs. There are also findings and studies that show there are certain diseases that have been reversed as a result of fasting and also dieting, the right diets. There was this study done at Johns Hopkins, and this neuroscientist did a study on fasting. Dr. Madsen did this study where they found, some great benefits about fasting. And it was noted that if you go hours without food, the body exhausts its sugar storage and start burning fat. The study shows that also fasting protects the organs like the heart, the liver, the pancreas, and protect you from diseases like heart disease, inflammatory diseases, as well as neurodegenerative disorders. Fasting also cleanses the body of toxins and regenerate your cells. So fasting is basically a way to give your organs a break so they can do their work. There's this doctor that I listen to that recommends fasting, especially for people who have diabetes and other illnesses.
I'm Andreas Enfeldt from DietDoctor.com, and I'm here with Dr. Jason Fung, a nephrologist from Canada. Welcome.
Oh, thanks very much. And if you're a type 2 diabetic, it's a dietary disease. It's a disease of essentially too much sugar. So if you understand it like that, then the answer is to get that sugar out, get it down. So the first thing you need to do is cut out all the sugar, cut out a lot of these refined carbohydrates, which are just sugar. So the breads and the pastas, right? So they're all chains of sugar. That's all carbohydrates are, chains of sugar. As you eat them, they get broken down into sugar. So if you have too much sugar, if diabetes is essentially too much sugar, you got to stop taking sugar. Otherwise, you're going to make it worse. So that's probably the first thing. You can do more exercise, try and burn it off. And the other thing that you can do is try to do something more extreme, such as fasting, for instance. You can actually
more extreme than a strict low-carb diet. I love it. Okay, fasting. Tell me more about it.
So fasting is actually the most efficient and the most effective way to lower insulin. There's really no drug that does it. There are actually two, but they're not very effective to lower insulin. But if you understand that the disease is too much sugar, too much insulin, then you got to say, well, if it's too much sugar, too much insulin, let's get rid of the sugar, let's get the insulin down. How am I going to do that, right? So the thing about the sugar, you can go on a very low-carb diet, a ketogenic diet, and that will get your sugars down. But it doesn't necessarily get your insulin down because the proteins and the fats still raise insulin. Not to the same degree that carbohydrates do, but they still raise insulin. So you can get that sugar down, but you won't get that insulin down. So you can actually put people on various periods of fasting because you're not taking anything. It's not simply low carb, it's low protein and low fat, right? It's nothing at all. So think about what's going to happen here. The body is not going to have anything coming in. So what it's going to happen is it's going to start burning that sugar. And that's perfect. That's exactly what we want it to do. It starts burning sugar. After it burns the sugars, your sugars come down. You don't have to take medications. You don't have to take insulin. After that, it starts burning fat. And that's perfect. That's exactly what we want to do. And there's always two questions that come up when you talk about fasting. One, can I do it? And the thing is you have to understand is that literally billions of people around the world fast on a regular basis through their entire lives, right? So the Muslims, the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Catholics, almost every major religion in the world prescribes fasting. Not because it's super harmful, because it's very beneficial. And what happens during the fast is that your insulin levels go down. Perfect. That's exactly what we want. So what we're doing is we're burning off all that sugar and getting it out of the system, right? As opposed to just getting it out of the blood, we're actually getting it out of the entire body. So the fasting does both things. It lowers the insulin and it lowers the sugars. The other thing that always comes up with fasting is it harmful? And this is what always comes up. Am I going to go into starvation mode? And what's interesting when you look at fasting is that studies of fasting show the exact opposite. You don't have less energy, you have more energy. So there are certain things that get activated when you're fasting. So growth hormone goes up, for instance, to preserve lean muscle. Then you'd start burning just fat. Adrenaline goes up to give you more energy. And you're fueling all that energy with fat because you can measure free fatty acids in the blood and they go up. So what's happening is that you're burning fat, you're preserving your muscle, and you've got plenty of energy.
So when you eat, your body breaks down the food that you eat into glucose, which is sugar, the body's main source of energy. Insulin is activated when we eat, and its job is to get the levels of glucose in your bloodstream to go down and help other tissues or organs utilize the glucose for energy. Insulin is a hormone made from the pancreas and allows the cells to utilize glucose for energy. In a normal circumstance, when glucose enters your cells and the level of the glucose in your bloodstream goes down, it signals the pancreas to stop producing insulin. And when the liver doesn't respond to insulin, that's when you have insulin resistance, and that leads some people to have diabetes. Also, this can lead to problems like fatty liver, especially when you overconsume high carbs items like rice and bread, pasta, and high fructose corn syrup. When you fast, you are basically putting this activation of insulin at a pause. The other thing that fasting does is to help your body become sensitive to insulin. After you fast and you break the fast, less insulin is produced, and it regulates your blood glucose level and your insulin production instead of spiking it as it would if you were just eating the regular 3 meals with the snacks or eating every few hours.
And there's also a difference between true hunger, and that means you have the feeling that, hey, I think I'll eat something soon. But you don't have the need. You could go another hour or another 2 hours until it becomes convenient, which is very different from cravings. And this is people saying, oh my God, I feel terrible, I'm dying, I'm unfocused, I'm dizzy, I'm lightheaded, I have to have something. That is completely different. That is not true hunger. That is a physiological imbalance. Rule number 4 is that intermittent fasting restores balance. When we have weight gain, which is a rampant problem, it's an epidemic all over the world, weight gain is an imbalance between in and out in the body. And we've been told now for a while that it's about calories in, calories out. But it's not that simple. It's about why do we engage in that behavior? Why do we eat more and more? And the answer has to do with hormones and insulin in particular. Whenever we eat food, insulin goes up because insulin takes blood sugar into the cell where we can use some of it for the time being and we can store the rest for the future. Now, when we eat frequently, now we're going to trigger insulin frequently. And if we do that often, the insulin is not going to have time to come down between meals, which means we push it higher and higher and higher. And excess insulin over long periods of time results in insulin resistance. And when we have insulin resistance, we have an imbalance in storage and usage, which leads to additional hunger and cravings. So frequent meals actually changes our behavior from 2 reasons, both because we're creating a habit and an expectation, but also because we don't have access to the food. Since insulin is a storage hormone, we're shifting the balance towards storage and away from usage. So here's a graphic on what that looks like. The norm has become that we eat, like we said, every 3 hours or so. And what this means then is that after the last meal, we still have a period of time where insulin is high because we're processing that food, which means that there's really only 6 hours every day that we allow insulin to drop. So we're bringing up insulin 6 times a day, and it stays high for 18 hours, and there's only 6 hours that we're allowing it to drop. Now compare that with the other model we talked about, where you compress that feeding window down to about 6 hours. Then there's still going to be 3 hours after that last meal, but there's a huge difference because we're only bringing up insulin twice a day, and it only lasts for about a total of 9 hours, which means now we have 15 hours. We have 2.5 times as long to allow that insulin to drop. So we're creating a balance. We're restoring balance between storage and usage. Rule number 5 is that intermittent fasting is very, very safe. But even so, you'll probably come across some advice warning you about the dangers. And one thing they often bring up is they call it an eating disorder, because on the surface it could look like bulimia to them. That bulimia is when someone has an unhealthy emotional relationship to food. They feel very, very guilty about food, and they deprive themselves, and then when they can't stand being deprived anymore, now they compensate with excess. And they say that intermittent fasting will mimic this behavior and drive this, and nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, when you start intermittent fasting, then you create a healthier relationship to food. You reduce cravings, you reduce hunger. We're also warned about dehydration. They say that when you eat less, that you forget to drink. Well, my experience with myself and hundreds of other people is the opposite, that when you reduce the food, then you're more likely to carry around a water bottle, you're more likely to have an extra cup of tea or coffee or some other drink. And then they say that you will be hungry, you're going to suffer from low energy, you have mood swings and irritability, and you will also raise cortisol because it's very stressful for the body. Well, it's not entirely untrue, but it is probably going to happen much less than you think if you do it gradually. And it's only because we're trying to change a pattern, a habit, and an expectation in the body. So for a few days, 2, 3, 4 days maybe, you might have some of this, but then you'll have much less. This is only the body trying to get over a carb addiction where you have always been providing blood sugar every few hours, so the body expects it. And when you stop, it gets a little insecure, but it soon passes, and then you're much, much better off. So what we really need to do is to compare the short-term discomfort to the long-term benefit. So if someone's an alcoholic, they're going to feel terrible if they stop drinking. But does that mean that the right thing is to keep drinking? I don't think anyone would argue for that. So if your body is addicted, whether it's for alcohol or to frequent meals or processed foods or sugar or carbohydrates, then the long-term solution is to stop doing that. And if you have a few days of discomfort, then it's going to be very worth it. And like I said, if you do it gradually, then you probably won't even notice.
I know culturally, at least in the West, the 3 meal a day, especially breakfast, came from, Western cultures. But breakfast does not have to be as prescribed by the Westerners. So if you're fasting during the day, all day, you are having breakfast in the evening, okay? If you are doing intermittent fasting, your breakfast might be during lunchtime. So, this idea of conforming to what others have prescribed You know, maybe at the time it worked for them, you know, because at the time food was more natural than now. Most food these days comes from the lab or the factory, so it's not real. So you have to be, you know, you have to put that in mind. Whenever you have your breakfast, whenever you break your fast, the important thing is what you eat. Not when you eat it, but what you eat. And I know there's this saying in the American society or American culture that breakfast is the most important or should be the most important meal of your day. That can be true, but the meaning of that should be what you eat when you break your fast should be the most important thing of the day. Whatever time of the day that you decide to break your fast or have your breakfast, the first thing you put in your mouth is the most important thing, because you've been fasting all night and or all night and morning and or all night, day, and part of the evening maybe. You don't want to put anything that's not beneficial to the body. You know, when you fast for a long time, it is highly important to put nutritious food in your body. Obviously the ones doing it for health reasons, they're more conscious of what they eat, so when they break their fast, they know to consume things that are nutritious and beneficial to their body. But for some people that do it for religious reason, they just fast, and when it's time to break their fast, they just eat whatever they were craving for, their favorite, whatever it is. So being mindful of what they first consume or how they break their fast is not the most important thing in their mind. They just want to eat and move on. For a fast to be beneficial health-wise, you have to be mindful of your breakfast, what you break your fast with. You're missing out all the nutrition or nutrients that you need during the day, and then the worst thing you want to do is add some toxins, some chemicals, some greasy fried, highly processed food in your body. That's just creating more problems for yourself. Fasting obviously is not for everyone. If you have medical illnesses, diseases, disorders, especially eating disorder, I don't think you should try fasting at all. And whatever diet you are on and whatever situation you are in, make sure you consult with your doctor or medical provider before fasting if you've never done it. For me, I had avoided fasting for the longest because of some medical issues. I've always been under the impression that fasting will make things worse, but as I'm doing these researches and I'm, finding all these awesome health benefits from the experts, from doctors and stuff, I'm like, maybe I can even get better. I mean, alhamdulillah, I'm way healthier now than I was like 6-7 years ago. A lot of times it's just that we're so programmed to listen to our cravings and what we want instead of what's beneficial. Genetically, we're not supposed to eat those food, all the high fructose things, all the highly processed products that we eat. Now the need for having snacks and all the dopamines we get from eating all this sugary stuff, over processed stuff, the chips, the snacks and all that. People are finding ways to basically revert back to long time ago times, almost like the old ages where they ate when food was available. Obviously, that's not the same situation now. With all these inventions and development and progress we made, obviously food is not a problem for most Western worlds, at least in developed nations. If anything, it is abundant and people overeat just because the food is there. I hope you find this video informative. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. And if you are into health and beauty the natural way, make sure you subscribe. I hope you have a wonderful journey in becoming a healthier version of yourself. Thank you for your time. You have a wonderful, blessed day, evening, night, wherever you are, and I hope to catch you on my next video.